all about writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 34, part 6, on our series on writing craft. I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who is an award-winning, best-selling author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter.
And I am Sara, here with my co-host Ben, who is an award-winning, best-selling author and ghostwriter, editor, and publisher. And today on Writing Craft, we are diving into point of view, or POV, and we're going to talk about first, third, and even a little bit second point of view, and talk about what they are, what makes them different from one another, and even a little bit pros and cons of them, and maybe even expectations of what readers are used to seeing and things like that. So I'm going to dive in and admit to something that Ben knows about me, but I really usually only ever write in first person point of view. I have written in third occasionally, but I write in first person, which means me, I walk here, I feel this, or I felt that way, or I stood over there, depending if you're present or past tense. But that is the I, me, my, and you're in the head of that character, which means that whatever is happening outside of that character, whatever character ABC is doing, I only, because you're in my head as the character one, main character, I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they're feeling. I can only observe and interact with them. So it's like playing first person video game when you're writing.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I, as you know, generally write in third person.
Yes.
And there's two kinds of third person. One is third person limited, and the other is third person omniscient. Third person limited is actually quite similar to first person. I'm not saying I when I'm writing, I say he or she or they, but I'm sort of over the shoulder of the point of view character. So I'm writing in the third person, so I'm talking about the other person being the character. But in third person limited, it's the same as first person in that I stay in the head of that one character the whole time. Even though I'm writing in third person as if they are separate from me, I'm only seeing the world from their point of view. So same thing as with first. If I want to know what's happening in somebody else's brain, I have to bring that out in the narrative through conversation, dialogue, actions. I have to stay in the same point of view as one person. Now this is different from third person omniscient, which is when you can switch from one character to another whenever you want. So in third person omniscient, I'm still saying he, she, they, but I can be in this person's head, describing the scene from them, and then the next paragraph, I shift over, and now I'm in another person's head, and I'm describing the scene from their point of view. Third person omniscient has been around for a long time, and certainly if you read back books in the 80s, is very common. Very common. It is less so nowadays. I'm not going to say that it's wrong, third person omniscient. You're certainly allowed to write that way. But the standards of writing have evolved over the decades, and third person limited is generally considered to be the preferred method. So if you're going to write in third person, try to go limited if you can, which means that you can only describe the scene from one person's point of view, even though you're saying he, she, or they.
And I think what you were saying too, staying in the head, that's a term that we use in writing sometimes where you say you don't want to be head jumping. And what that means is if you're sitting in, character one talking, she said this, she said that, she this, right? You can't randomly in one sentence or one paragraph hop into her mother's head who's across the room and talk about what she's feeling or seeing or observing and then hop back into your main character. You can't do that. You have to create, if you're going to do that, you have to do it consistently throughout and be kind of in the heads of maybe a couple characters. Some books do that where they might have, and I do this in my book, you might have a couple characters that are kind of your main characters whose heads you get in, and you can do that in first person or third person. But in order to not kind of head jump or do that omniscient thing, which is I see it mostly in very difficult literary books nowadays.
Hmm.
Otherwise I don't see it. I'm sure you're an editor, you can even speak to that more, like you said, with standards. But if you want to head jump, you can do it by breaking up into chapters, delineating whose head you're in.
That's
I've
right.
even seen I think it's Kate Morton does this. And I'm actually doing this with the book I'm writing now. It's the first time I've ever tried it. It's odd, but I like it. It's different, where there's maybe one main character who is in first person. And then if you have secondary but important characters that drive the story forward, they're in third person.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that.
So you
Yeah,
can do it, you can mix it up, but you have to be very specific, like this is part 1 and it's this character, or this is chapter 5 and it's this character, and it needs to be so that you're giving your reader clues on whose point of view you're going to be observing this chunk of the story in, and you cannot jump out of that when you're in that one lane.
that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Like I know, Sarah, you'll make each chapter from one character's point of view, even though it's all first person, and your chapters will even start with the name of the character. So it's very
Yes.
clear. Okay, we're now in Marie's head,
Yeah.
or we're now in Jane's head. In third person, I do the same. I do sometimes have a chapter with multiple points of view, but there's a very clear break. There's a very clear scene break to show that we are switching from this point of view to this point of view. I try to keep them separate by chapters as well, but sometimes it doesn't work. If I'm in an action-packed, fast-moving scene where both of my characters are doing something but they're not together, then I have to cut back and forth between them. But I do it with a scene break, and that way it's very clear. We're now in this person's head, then we're in this person's head, and I don't know. It's I actually find it quite fun. I know
I do too.
some people get really frustrated because they want to sort of capture everything. And if you want to capture everybody's thoughts and everybody's perspectives, just write third person omniscient. But um, if you want to write in third person limited or first person, there are some limitations. You cannot know what another person is thinking when you're in one person's point of view. And there are some funny slip ups. Like I've seen this as an editor where you're right. Someone's writing a third person limited, so they're in that person's head, but then they suddenly describe that person. They talk about their brown eyes, or their lips split in a big smile. I'm like, well, who's looking at that? Because they can't see themselves, right? And it can actually be really hard in third person limited or in first person to describe the character whose point of view you are, because unless they're looking in a mirror, or they can't actually see themselves. And so that's one of the most common slip ups in point of view I see, is
Mhm.
when authors will actually describe the character externally even though they're still in their head.
Yeah, and the only way you can get around that, if it's really important that it's known that that character has brown eyes or something, is things that other characters mention offhand
Hmm.
in conversation, and it has to be done naturally, not weirdly,
Yeah.
obviously. But at the same time, this is something that I actually read one time, um, and I think it stands for both first person as well as third person. I keep wanting to say third person omniscient, but it's third person um
Limited.
limited. Thank you. It's I gotta like write it. It keeps slipping because it's not what I'm used to thinking. And but when you do not describe the physical characteristics of the character the reader is inhabiting by experiencing this book, without realizing it, they're almost putting themselves in that character. So
Mm.
like in unless it's very obvious what the description of that character is and they have these, very distinct features that are kind of really hammered home, a lot of times people will put themselves in the shoes of that character because there's not like a very distinct physical description. And one of those is very famous, Twilight.
Oh yeah.
Bella, the main character, is not described in detail ever. Edward
Mm.
doesn't describe her. She doesn't describe herself. I read them once, but I don't know if we have like hair color, eye color, height, body type, nothing. And so somebody had done a study on that, and they were like, part of what made it so easy for women, especially, to fall into those books is because they all imagine themselves as Bella, with
Hmm.
somebody like
Hmm.
Edward falling in love with them. And so because Edward is described in detail, but Bella is not.
Yeah.
And so that's, something in a way, if you really want your readers to kind of inhabit the characters you've put on the page, you, of course, might have an idea of what they look like. But if you don't make a big deal about their descriptions, you're providing a window and an opportunity for your readers to get doubly invested in that character.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I read a couple of novellas just recently, same thing. It's first person, it's a female lead, and I realized when I finished both novellas, I had a very clear idea of who this character was. I really liked her. I have no idea what she looks like. I have an idea in my head of what she might look like, but I realized she is never described because it leaves it open. How tall is she? What shade of skin does she have? Like anything, I have no idea, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, in the case you gave with Twilight, primarily female readership can see themselves as Bella. In this case, I don't see myself as this female lead, but I like her. I like her a lot. I like her personality. I like the way she thinks and the way she carries herself and the way other people react to her suggests that she is attractive. But
Yeah.
that's up to me to decide what I want that to be entirely. So it's actually a really neat thing with first person and third person limited is that you can if you want not describe your main character ever and just leave it to the imagination of the people and how other characters react to them can give impressions of what they are. So
Yes.
it's very clever.
Yeah. Now, I will say, do you want to know one of the places I notice third person omniscient used often? Um, Usually within the scope of anywhere from 2 to maybe 4 characters in a book, but the points of view switch without warning, and
Hmm.
that is in the romance genre.
Okay.
I've read some, in the past, and they'll be in the middle of a very steamy, like starting, early on love scene or a teasing scene or something like that. And in the middle of this scene, without warning, we're suddenly in the other person's head.
Hmm.
And I know the writers are doing that because then you can kind of see what both people are experiencing as the scene unfolds. Because the one thing you cannot do, if I have chapter 1, character 1, here's what happens, you get their thoughts, you get their feelings, you get their emotions. Chapter 2, you're in character 2, you can't revisit that scene and replay it through their point of view. That was a big no-no. As an editor, I'm sure you would be like, we can't do that. Move the
Hmm.
book ahead. And that's
Yeah.
a huge thing I see sometimes with newer writers where they're like, well, now I'm going to say what happened from this character's point of view. Nope, not allowed. You can
Yeah.
talk about it and react to it after, but you can't go rehash it. So I think when I see that in romance writing, especially, because that's really where I usually see that kind of omniscience where we just jump around in people's heads mid-scene, is
Yeah.
because they want to make sure you're getting points of view kind of simultaneously. But I don't like it. I find it very jarring.
Hmm.
But I think that readership is used to that in some respects too. So it's not as
Absolutely. And
surprising.
yeah, it's definitely what you're used to. If you're used to third person omniscient, you won't find it jarring. But like
Right.
you, Sarah, I also find it jarring now when it happens because I always write in third person limited, and I've gotten used to reading books in third person limited. So um, as an author, just be mindful of choose a point of view that you want to use and stick with it. That I think is the key. All of them are fine, but they have their strengths and weaknesses. And I find the limitations of third person limited quite a fun challenge. In that, okay, I have to get this point across, but there's no way that my point of view character would know that. So what am I going to do? And I have to solve that problem as an author, and I have to do it in a way that is natural and makes sense, and that my character would do something that would let them know that. Um, I certainly have worked as a ghostwriter with people who are not terribly firm on the concept of third person limited, and I don't mind writing third person omniscient as a ghostwriter if that's what the person wants. What bothers me is when they want to break the point of view just once. You know, it's third person limited for the whole book, but just this one scene, we have to break it to do this. And that's when I'll say, no, no, we do not. And I will bend over backward to find a way that have like one of our POV characters like watching over the wall so they can see the scene that we have to show the reader. Um, in a book that I've just recently been working on, actually ghostwriting, my client was adamant that in one of the climactic scenes, he wanted to show a whole bunch of little scenes from characters that we'd never met before, just to show how big the action was across a whole city, lots of things happening. And I eventually compromised with him. I took a whole bunch of our secondary characters who are not point of view characters, but they're in the book, and so the reader has met them before. And I gave each one of them one point of view scene. And it's a whole chapter is just that, is secondary characters, one after another, having point of view scenes that advance the story along. And that was actually kind of fun. But I contained it in one chapter. There is one chapter in the whole book where I break the point of view rules, but it's still third person limited, but it's from characters who we do not normally have their point of view. And I sort of use that as a chance to put the reader on edge, because this is very different. Like I'm really messing with you now, but also it gave me a chance to use different voices. And I guess that's something else I like to bring up about point of view, is that it does give you the opportunity as an author to use different tones. Like the chapter written from this character is written in this style, whereas this character has a very different style, maybe much much cruder or smaller words or just a different take on things.
Yep.
It can be a lot of fun to do that.
Yeah, I love doing that. That's when I switched from doing first person, one point of view. My first couple of books were just from one character's point of view, which came with its own challenges, right? It's like everything was only through one point of view, period. And like as if I was embodying and the readers weren't right. But then once you open the door up to other characters, you get to really play with voice in point of view
Hmm.
and it's cadence, it's turns of phrases that they always use, it's even education level you can tell sometimes. And so I think no matter if it's first or third, if you do have an opportunity to use multiple characters, do it just for the exercise and kind of the variety for you as a writer too, and for your readers. 100%.
Yeah.
But I do want to touch a little bit before the end on second person,
Hmm.
which, and the best description I can come up with second person is choose your own adventure books.
Absolutely.
Remember those where it was like you got up from your desk and went to the window and there was a sword out the window. Do you pick up the sword or do you go back to your desk? Like though that's second person.
Yeah.
And um I really don't think that that's actually considered literature. Like Ben, you're a publisher. I mean, the thing is anything is possible, right? And obviously literary works can be really experimental, but for mainstream commercial literature, like that's just not the going way to write a book now.
Yeah, it is a whole genre of writing, and I actually have written one. It's called an interactive novel. It's based in the Virtues of War universe, but it's a separate book. It's not canon. It's not part of the trilogy, but it's based in that universe, and it's exactly that. Everything is second person. So as the author, I'm talking directly to you, the reader. You are doing this right now. And then, yeah, then you get to a choice. Do you want to do this, this, or this? And so they make a choice, and it's really cool. It's all digital now,
Oh,
so you can read it on your phone or on your Kindle. And once you make a choice, you can't go back. There's no cheating. It's not like with the old paper books, like, oh, I don't like that choice. I'm going to go back and read. But the difference is there's also no dead ends. It used to be, I
you
choose to
died.
talk to this person. He pulls out a gun and shoots you. You're dead. Huh.
Yeah.
Right?
Start over.
There are no endings like that in the digital interactive novels, but your choices matter. And
Sure.
so you'll go down a different path. But the whole thing is written in second person because you, the reader, are the character.
Yeah.
So it does exist. It
Yes.
definitely is a niche market, but there are lots and lots and lots of these interactive novels being written these days. And
They're like
yeah,
novelization video games, probably, but like you don't write a book. Like I wouldn't write a novel in
no,
second person point of view.
that would
Like
be
you just
very
you
avant-garde. Yeah, I agree.
that's what I mean, like fancy literary, like I'm breaking the mold. It is the one and only, and everybody's going to copy me. Like it's so difficult to write like that.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually went to a writing workshop once, and one of the people there was writing their memoir in second person.
Oh wow, their
And it was
memoir.
so crazy to see and read after reading everybody else's memoirs, right? And which are always in first person.
Yeah.
And but it really was stemming from also a way to for that author to distance themselves from the childhood trauma they were writing about.
Oh yeah,
And
fascinating.
right. So it was just a really, but like I was like, well, I guess like again, more avant-garde, but you could potentially do that memoir that way. It would probably, you'd struggle to find a publisher who would be like, I don't know what to do with this.
Hmm.
I mean, self-publishing, indie publishing is always an option if that was the voice you found yourself writing your memoir in for whatever
Hmm.
reason. Um, but I just wanted to touch on that because I think a lot of people don't talk about second person.
Hmm.
I will say choose your own adventure books used to stress me out because I knew I was always going to pick something wrong. And I remember one time we were it would like it was the first scene and it was you're walking home from school and behind a tree there was a magic sword. There was a magic sword. Do you pick it up or do you keep walking home? And I chose you keep walking home, and you turn to, page 261 or whatever it is, and it's like you went home and lived a very boring life. And I was like, yes, I won. I won. Sad. I was like, I closed the book and I'm like, there, I'm done.
Awesome.
What does that say about my personality? Ugh,
Cool. So, but you're absolutely right. Second person POV is a thing. It has its place.
yes.
Another place that you can see it is in manuals, like technical books. They're written in second person all the time. As you build your
Yes.
Type T17 your radio transmitter, make sure
Yeah.
you do this. Right.
Yeah.
That is another place you'll see second person. So it exists. It just doesn't exist in fiction very often. Um, and it's very limited in how it is used,
Yeah.
but it exists.
Yeah.
But first person, very popular, always has been, I'm sure always will be. Third person and its two versions, limited and omniscient, also both very popular, kind of the standard. Third person limited.
Hmm.
um, and yeah, like you said, that one example of switching between it. If your main character is written in first person, but then you have other chapters written in third person by a secondary character, that's quite interesting, actually. And it can really make a distinction between who is the most important character and who are not. But you want to show something from their point of view. Yeah, but there's lots you can do, I guess, is what I'd like to leave everyone with today. There are lots of different options you can explore. Just make sure you know what you're doing and be consistent. Whatever choice you make, just make that choice and run with it and own it, and then your writing will shine through.
Yep. That's a perfect consistency is key.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, that's our show for everyone. For everyone for today. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our chats, and feel free to leave a review because it really does help us a lot. If anyone is looking for help with any aspect of their writing, we recommend our friends at Cascadia Author Services. You could find them at cascadiaauthorservices.com. And you can catch up with Sarah at sarahdahlman.com and on Instagram.
And you can find Ben at bennettrcoles.com as well as Facebook and Instagram. Thank you again for joining us today. Please reach out if there are any other topics you'd like us to cover in detail. And otherwise, we will see you again when we next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.